Hi everyone, Paul Moderman here. I've been monkeying around with something and I wanted to show you. It's so cool. It's a project called Claude Engineer, which is an interactive command line or UI that uses Claude 3.5 Sonnet to assist with software dev tasks. But the cool thing is Claude Engineer allows Claude in this framework to generate and manage its own tools. So if you're working with Claude when you're prompting for things and Claude sees that it doesn't have a tool in its tool belt to help you with what you're asking, it can actually experiment and write its own tool and add that tool to the tool belt and then just keep going. It's it's really cool. And so I'm going to try and experiment live here and see what it can do. I kind of set up some stuff on my computer to run down a predetermined path or a simple path, and let's see how it works. Well, I had to restart my local environment there, so let's get back in. So Claude Engineer comes with this nice web UI, so I'm going to use that to help me along here. So the first thing I do, which is kind of cool, is I can just ask Engineer to like tell me what the tools are that it has available. So okay, so these are the tools, and you can verify that. You can just see it in the actual Claude Engineer base project, which has browser tool, create folders tool, and so on and so forth. A handy set of first tools for it to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Claude Engineer to make me a tool to look at a database, a SQLite database, because none of these tools can actually open and query a local SQLite database. So I'm going to ask it to make me a tool that does that. So I just asked it to create a tool that can examine and run queries against a SQLite database, and I'd like to see the schemas that are in there too. That's usually helpful when you're writing tools for databases. So okay, here we go. Sending to Claude Engineer. Engineer is thinking, and sometimes I've found that this can take a little bit, uh, depending on what it needs to go and do. But let's just see this. This should be a pretty simple one because SQLite in Python is a super common example across the internet, so it should be relatively easy for it to create a tool with that. Okay, so it looks like it's created a database tool. Um, it has created some parameters for the tool, but in the Claude Engineer tool itself, I don't have to be very programmer-ish. I can just have a chat kind of with that stuff. So let's look at what it did. Yep, so it added this SQLite tool to it. I like how Claude Engineer and Claude itself behind the scenes have written a nice little description of the tool to help things along, and then it just goes through relatively straightforward Python code. I'm not going to read that code right now, but I mean in a production world, I would read this code relatively carefully before I actually put it somewhere. But I'm not going to read the code, but I can see it doing the common SQLite things that you can do in Python and allowing you to execute things for it. So let's do an example. I have actually downloaded a database onto my computer, a SQLite database. So let's see if it can examine that database and find things out for me. Can you tell me the schema of, well, I'll say it like this. Can you tell me the tables available in users Paul Sakila.db? So I'll ask engineer that. Let's see if it picks the right tool and does it. Okay, this is actually This is actually pretty cool. So here, let's look at, because the nice thing about Claude Engineer is on the command line it gives you some kind of thought process that it goes through. What's really cool is that in the process of trying to get the schema the first time, it encountered an error in the code. And then the tool creator tool jumped in and created another tool that addressed the problem that I saw that the command line saw in examining the schema that I asked it to do. So at runtime, Claude Engineer created another tool that was able to handle my request because the first tool didn't quite cut it. So it actually created another tool that allowed it to do that stuff. So now the interesting thing is, because I told it to give me a tool that could examine schemas, and then it did after going through and rethinking it. Now let's see if it can look at data in that table or in any table in there. So I'm going to say, let's see, what are the first 5 films in the film table? Let's see how it handles that. Okay. So here's what it's got. It came back with the first 5. Let's just double check it. I actually already opened that tool in my SQLite browser. Okay, so the films table has Academy Dinosaur, an epic drama of a feminist and mad scientist, blah, 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 blah. Released in 2006, 99-cent rental rate, rated PG. Okay. Ace Goldfinger, yep. Adaptation Holes, Affair Prejudice, African Egg. Okay, so it did all the stuff. Now, behind the scenes, what happened is it, let's see. It went through and it actually tried a few things behind the scenes to do this, because what it tried to do first was go to a different tool and then run Python in that tool, but then it figured out to use the first tool it wrote, and it got good results and brought those back. So the interesting thing here is that Claude has 200,000 tokens of total context, and this experiment cost 108,000 tokens of Claude's total context. And in my case, let's just check how much that cost me. That cost me 40 cents. So this whole experiment of creating a tool, having the tool adapt to various paths I give it, and coming out with an interesting result burned 100,000 tokens and cost me 40 cents. And I think that's pretty well worth it. I mean, 40 cents to do a thing that would surely take me longer to hand code, and that adapts to errors that it finds and keeps moving along, is just, it's incredible. It's incredible. So, thanks for watching the demo, guys. We'll see you later.